My name is John Weems, and I'm the Director of Accountability and Reporting for the Oregon Department of Education. Before we begin the webinar, we want to make sure everyone is able to fully participate and engage. If you can hear me, please chat to make sure the audio is coming through. Excellent, thank you. So this is the third of 3 webinars that we're holding today. The first one at 10 a.m. was for districts. This one is also for districts. We held a media webinar at noon. These webinars all share the same content and slide deck. So this webinar is intended for educators. If you're a member of the media, we did conduct a webinar for the media at noon, and we asked that this webinar be reserved just for educators. If you're a member of the media, please contact Mark Siegel if you have any questions. And in general, all media questions should be directed to our Communications Director, Mark Siegel. So second, we want to be as responsible as possible to your questions today. For that reason, we would like you to look at the chat box. We are muting everyone. With over 60 people on the line, it's impossible to run a webinar without muting everyone. And that means any questions you have should be sent to us through the chat feature. We'll do our best to answer the questions as they appear. Some questions we might answer at the end of the presentation, especially if they're more involved. And then some questions we might need to follow up with you via email. And we'll have contact information for you later in the presentation. And then lastly, we'll be recording and posting this webinar to our Every Student Succeeds Act. We're going to pick the best of the 3 that we do today and post that one. It will be a day or two, a couple days before the file gets converted and posted
for an hour.
So we will have it available on our ESSA webpage. And once it's there, you're free to share it with your colleagues and others. Okay, so let's start.
Put it back.
As I said, I'm John Weems, the Director of Accountability and Reporting at ODE, and I'm joined by Tim Boyd,
Director of District and School Effectiveness.
And we're going to be leading you through the topics for the day. Here's an overview of the webinar that we're about to join. Before I go further, I'd like to remind everyone to please mute themselves. We will try to be proactive and mute people, but we ask that you help us out in this webinar and please mute yourself at all times. So we have 4 goals for this webinar. One is to inspire and make clear the spirit of partnership that we're working on at the state, and this webinar is really directed towards helping strengthen the partnership we have between ODE and our school districts. We also want to reinforce the 4 key commitments of Oregon's plan that we developed in response to the Every Student Succeeds Act. Tim will talk a little bit more about those. Those were developed through extensive stakeholder engagement and by listening to our stakeholders as they described what they wanted to see in Oregon schools and their hopes and dreams for Oregon students. We also want to outline ODE's collaborative approach to strengthening district systems, differentiated supports, and leading for equitable student outcomes. And Tim's going to spend quite a bit of time talking about the shift that we're undergoing right now. And then lastly, we want to talk about a little bit about the at-a-glance school and district profiles. This really will just be an overview. I did provide a very detailed webinar this summer that talked in detail about almost all of the data elements on all 3 of the reports. So that's available on the district training page in case someone wants to go back and review that. Here we're going to talk at a higher level and talk a little bit more about using them as conversation drivers. With that, we'll have Tim talk about our partnership with districts.
If we want to see different outcomes for Oregon students, we must take a different approach. This is going to require significant unlearning, as No Child Left Behind has had a deep impact on how we engage in much of this work. This year, we move away from simply labeling schools and focus on a partnership-based improvement model. This partnership stems from Oregon's plan under the Every Student Succeeds Act, which was put into place December of 2015. Today, as we chat about this information, we're connecting with education leaders across the state. This morning, we had about 130 participants in our webinar, and we just creeped over 90 participants this afternoon. So it's a significant turnout for this conversation. We're really excited about the opportunity to share today. But this first touch between state and local education leaders is an invitation to collaborate. It's an opportunity to review local and state data, determine needs, focus resources in order to implement systems to support students where the needs are the greatest. We are ready to listen humbly, think innovatively, and acknowledge that this critical work is going to take significant effort and deep partnership to be successful. Together, we can co-create solutions that move the needle for our students. We are fully committed to these efforts. Oregon's plan for the Every Student Succeeds Act was developed through extensive engagement with stakeholders statewide. We held 24 community forums. We consulted with all 9 federally recognized tribes. And we held a series of technical work groups over multiple weeks that really drilled down into the elements of the law and how we as Oregonians wanted to move forward. Throughout those processes, 4 key themes emerged that really are the drivers for our work. Advancing equity, promoting a well-rounded education, strengthening district systems, and fostering ongoing engagement are the drivers that we're putting into place now. And as we move through the webinar and we talk about school profiles, we're really looking to enlist school districts as the center point or the agent of change in order to improve outcomes for students. Under No Child Left Behind, the model to support schools really became more of a shame and blame for our largest, most diverse elementary schools. We have nearly 2 decades of evidence under No Child Left Behind that we didn't help all of Oregon's students. While some efforts were successful, we need to change how we're engaging in this work if we're going to impact a greater number of students and to see those impacts be sustained. Historically, report cards have been used to tell the story of low-performing schools. And again, reducing schools to a rating, 5, 4, 3, 2, or 1, really reduced the complexity of those schools and the successes and strengths therein. One of our big shifts is going to be moving away from rating schools as failing schools or priority schools or focus schools into one of describing supports that we're developing and implementing. When past practice has focused school improvement directly at the school level. And as we move into this new model, we're really looking at improving district capacity to support all of their schools differently than we have in the past. Previously, we've used a top-down hierarchical approach where the state intervenes at the school and the accountability to improve was solely on the school. We want to share that accountability, not just in the test scores, but in asking ourselves, did we do what we said we would do? Did it have the impact we wanted it to have? And if not, do we have the right systems in place to respond accordingly? And we want the accountability for those questions and answers to really be shared between the state and the school districts and schools, and our schools and our school communities. Lastly, we really want to broaden our commitment to engaging stakeholders, not from a few folks weighing in on improvement plans and having isolated or stagnant family nights, but to one of ongoing stakeholder engagement that solicits broad input from decision makers in developing improvement plans and in monitoring the implementation of those plans over time. ESSA puts the power back in the hands of states. While there are still federal and local requirements that we need to adhere to, Oregon is doing our best to do things differently, and this is through partnership and co-creation. Historically, school improvement in Oregon has been limited to those federal requirements to designate Title I schools for assistance, but we're really moving that to say that all schools and districts have work to do, and that if we're really going to see improvement efforts be sustained over time, we have to strengthen school district capacity to support their own schools. We have different tools and resources developed and ready to share in order to move this work forward, but we're still working to differentiate those supports and getting the right things in the right places based on data, based on local context, and based on the needs of our schools and our districts. We want continuous improvement to be a value-add process, not just a compliance-driven process. Historically, school improvement efforts have been really framed at programmatic levels. We've overemphasized outcome data like reading and math achievement determined by statewide assessments. And because of this overemphasis, improvement was often reduced to getting off of a list, and the way to get off of that list was to fix data. This often came at the expense of the programs and experiences we would call well-rounded and engaging. Low math scores, let's do more math. Low reading scores, more reading. No time for more reading, let's cut the arts. Our current approach or our revised approach not only allows for, but actually promotes strategies that are going to advance well-rounded experiences for our students. This happens in partnership. All districts in the state have access to technical assistance to support continuous improvement. We have a variety of supports for different teams, offices, programs across the agency, and we're really working hard to ensure that we have those supports aligned to the needs of our school districts and that we're responsive when we hear requests for differentiation and adjustments. Some districts have access to that technical assistance as well as fiscal resources, and a few districts are going to have access to that technical assistance, fiscal resources, and personnel support aimed at enhancing improvement efforts. This is really to emphasize district partnerships to serve as the hub for this work, not just schools getting a few more dollars to implement programs, to see improvement, to see the dollars go away, to see the programs go away. When we talk about differentiating supports, our best vehicle to determine which school districts might be in need of different things are that state level data. Graduation rates, attendance, summative assessment scores, English learner progress. We also know that this is just the start. Data doesn't tell us the answers, it helps us ask better questions. This is an opportunity for sustained change in Oregon where ODE and districts can work together to co-create the types of supports needed in order to make significant and sustained improvement. This also means a departure from the top-down approach many have experienced. Again, there are still federal and state requirements that we need to follow, but the spirit of partnership means developing innovative ways to meet those requirements, keeping improved outcomes for students at the center of our work. We know that we have a lot of work to do. ODE will partner with districts and schools to deliver differentiated supports and resources depending on the needs of students. ODE will continue efforts already underway to promote alignment of various supports and resources with other equity-based programs like chronic absenteeism and high school success. To truly deliver on the aim of differentiated supports, ODE will rely on the district and school level needs assessment processes that shed light on the root causes of low outcomes for students. ODE will also rely on improvement plans built on routines to monitor implementation of improvement strategies that allow for small adjustments to approaches over time. This requires a focus on implementation data and leading indicators of success, elements of continuous improvement that have taken a back seat to outcome data and summative assessment scores.
Question?
To the previous points regarding data and needs assessment, OD's developed two sets of tools that we're excited to share with you today. By now, many of you have seen the new at-a-glance reports for schools and districts, but we wanted to highlight a few sections of the report. ODE's also invested significantly in the development of Oregon's integrated systems framework and needs assessments that we hope will serve as a catalyst for systems level improvement. Now, John will share a little bit about the process taken to develop the at-a-glance reports and to highlight some of the features there that will help us ask better questions.
All right, thank you, Tim. So I want to give some background here. By state law, ODE is required to produce school performance reports designed to inform parents and families and to improve schools. That's actually straight out of the law. We produced many report cards over the years, and there have been various constraints that we've been under to produce those. But we've realized that we know that these reports that we've produced over the years are not necessarily the most easy to understand. They're not necessarily easy to understand and accessible to parents. And we've created some new reports that I'll show you in just a minute that are still data rich, but we hope that they're more reader friendly, especially for parents. And as you guys know who submitted the data, they are personalized so that each school has a chance to tell part of their story and talk about their local strengths. So let's remind ourselves where the most recent report cards were. This is the last redesign that we did. It's now 5 years old. We had a stakeholder committee help us design, actually they designed it. And although this was a big improvement on previous designs, this is not the easiest design to read. There's a lot of good detail here. There's a lot of good data, but we've heard from parents that these are dense, hard to unpack, too many words, not enough graphics. And so we worked on trying to improve on this design to make one that was really meeting the needs of parents as directed by the law. So some of the major goals for the redesign that we had were the following. We wanted to design reports that are meaningful, especially for parents from historically underserved communities, and I'll talk about how we did that in just a second. These are often stakeholders who don't have a voice in our system, and so we decided to provide them that voice. We also wanted to show relevant state-level data to help foster family and community engagement. The data that's on the at-a-glance is only part of the data that ODE collects. This report is not meant to be an encyclopedia of data. It's meant to be an introduction, and it's meant to foster questions and ask people they're interested to maybe seek further and learn more. We also wanted to create a tool that moves us away from the blame and shame model that has an overall rating and distills schools down to a single number. We wanted to create more of a multiple measures dashboard, as our stakeholders asked for, so that we could look at areas for success and areas for improvement for schools, because every school has a strength, but every school can always improve. So we engaged stakeholders in this design, and we really tried to authentically engage them and really pay attention and listen to what they said to us. We held 11 parent and family focus groups in the fall of 2017. 10 of those were with parents from historically underserved and marginalized communities. And we went to ask them what kind of information they wanted to know about their schools and how should it be presented. What kinds of presentation and design features would make them want to read the report. And so 3 main themes came out of this engagement that we held. One is the parents consistently asked to know how their school creates a welcoming, safe, and inclusive environment, not only for the students, but also for the families in the community. They wanted a design that's simple, multicolored, and easy to read and understand. We live in a very fast-paced world. Families are very busy these days. We needed something that was fairly easy to understand, fairly simple, something that in a few seconds would draw the reader in. And that's what the parents asked for as well. They also wanted a report that emphasizes progress through relevant and actionable data. Now, if you look at this list and you know about the data that OD collects, you'll see that OD collects a lot of quantitative data on schools. Oh, no, go back one, please. There we go. OD collects a lot of quantitative data on schools, but a lot of what the parents asked for was qualitative data that could really only be provided by the individual schools. And so our design has a mix of both of those features. Once we had this initial feedback, we created some prototypes and we ran out again to the parents. We held 8 additional parent focus groups to help refine the prototypes and the design and the content to arrive at the design that we have now, which now we'll show you. Okay, so here's an example of an elementary school. We produced 3 different report styles, one for elementary and middle schools. Those are the same. We also have a high school report, which focuses more on progress through high school, through graduation and beyond. And then we also have a district report, which is provides a cross-section of data across the grades K through 12. Well, let's talk about the elementary one, which is the one we're going to show you today. You can see up front and center we have the 6 dials. And again, this is the idea about providing quick and easy to digest information. It meets the needs that we think of the parents. The parent groups we showed this to were pretty receptive of these designs. So we have the 6 key data points that you're initially drawn to. It shows the school as compared to the state. We also show the change from the previous year. Those are the up and down arrows. So there is some indication of progress over time. On the left, we have demographics of the school, and this is a really important section that I hope that most readers take a fair amount of time to look at, because for me, this demographic section really provides a lot of context when we look at the data and programs at the school. This particular school, this is actually a real school, although we anonymized the names. This particular school is incredibly diverse, probably one of the most diverse schools in the state. So I actually would love to go to this school just to experience the diversity, because diversity is a strength for our schools. This school also has about half of its students are now or were at one time English learners. So it's highly diverse school, lots of English learners. Looks like just about everyone is receiving a free or reduced lunch or is eligible for one, so pretty high poverty rates. And then you look at the languages spoken, there's 29 home languages spoken in this school. There's a lot of schools in the state that have that kind of language diversity. So this is an amazingly rich and diverse school. So then when you look back at some of the dials, again, our hopes are that people look at this with a lens beyond just trying to look for an A through F rating or a 1 through 5 rating, but really look and examine the data and look for strengths and weaknesses. You can see the academic success on the bottom. These numbers are a little bit lower than the state average, which is not unusual for a school with high poverty and high numbers of English learners. But this just highlights that if we're really true to our equity vision, these are the kinds of schools where the students deserve extra support. But at the same time, if we look at the upper right on the individual student progress indicator, you see that progress on English language arts and math is high at this school. These students in this school in general are either catching up to their peers around the state or moving ahead of their peers around the state. So this school has a number of strengths, strong diversity, and also coupled with that, really strong growth of their students. At the bottom, we have some of the local information that districts can provide. We have school goals and information about safe and welcoming environment. The middle section is the state goals which we provided, and that's focusing on graduation rate. Now if we go to the second page, okay, this has some more information. On the left we have information about the staff. We have some disaggregated data in the middle. Again, this is not about blaming and shaming, it's about helping us identify where extra supports are needed for our students. At the bottom, we have more opportunities for districts and schools to tell their story. At elementary school, parents talked a lot about bullying and harassment. They also wanted to know about extracurricular activities and how parents and communities can be engaged in the school. At the high school level, we have slightly different categories. We have career and technical education courses available, as well as advanced coursework. So there's really quite a bit of real estate here for districts to tell their own, schools to tell their own story, as well as a fair amount of state level data. Now there's been a few questions. Let's go back. I think I can answer some of those right now. Let's go back a little bit. That was just the last two. Okay, so elaborate a little on why only K2 was chosen for regular attenders information was one of the questions. That's only for the district report. The regular attenders information for schools includes all students in the school. On the district report, we wanted an early indicator for schools. So we chose to look at K2 regular attendance on the district at a glance. But the school regular attender data is all students. Another detailed question, do the state averages match the demographics for each school? If we go back to the previous page, that answer is a little bit complicated. We do have a technical manual for this that's been posted that does talk about this in more detail. For the assessment data, the state averages do match the grades served in the school. For class size, that's all grades combined. And for regular attenders, that's all grades combined. So we did make some choices on what the Oregon average was, and it does vary a little bit by indicator. And again, if you want some more details, we do have a technical manual available on the web. We can send you the link for that. That does describe that in more detail. Okay, thank you. Okay, now moving on to the next set of tools for Tim to talk about.
So as John just shared, data doesn't tell us the answers, it helps us ask better questions. And when we display data on these at-a-glance reports, we have a wealth of information that is really a snapshot in time. If we want to know how to best approach strategies that are going to drive improvement or improve outcomes for kids, we really wanted to take a systems level approach to that work. And that's where Oregon's Integrated Systems Framework was developed. The framework and needs assessments were adapted from tools developed at the University of Kansas Swift Center. This is important to highlight given the research base that informs this work. Simply put, when districts and school systems are healthy, as described aspirationally in the documents, outcomes for learners are optimal. You'll notice the domains called out on the slide, but I want to draw your attention to the image on the right of the screen. The knot truly represents the interconnectedness of these systems. More importantly, is that this framework was built with equity at the center. If we're truly going to advance equity in our districts and schools, we must engage in systems level work to ensure that each and every student has access to and benefits from a high quality, well-rounded education. These tools also provide state and district leaders, educators, parents, and stakeholders the opportunity to review systems improvement over time. We have a way to quantify implementation and improvement efforts in addition to reviewing student outcome data. These resources are posted to our website, including some guidance on how to use the needs assessment. And we're working on some feedback that we received this morning on some of the tools that were developed in the University of Kansas work. We also want to keep the conversation moving. So in part of our commitment to fostering ongoing engagement, we want school district and school leaders to be equipped to continue these conversations with educators, with school communities, with stakeholders, even with students where appropriate. Tools to support these conversations have been posted to our web pages, and they include some high-level overview documents, frequently asked questions that are germane to the law, some of the key messages that talk about shifts, and again, why we've moved away from rating schools on a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 basis, and how we engage in deeper conversations given the at-a-glance tools. One of the questions that was posted earlier is, when will school districts be notified of opportunities for these supports? As we speak, we're in conversations and discussions with superintendents who have identified schools under the requirements of the law, and we're working on setting up opportunities to really formalize partnerships, determine how to best understand local context, and to figure out what is the best course of action moving forward in providing resources, personnel supports, and in demonstrating those improvement plans. Another question that was just received: when will ORIS be required to be used for submitting district plans and school continuous improvement plans? We are still formalizing or finalizing that guidance. Some of the questions are whether or not ORIS will be required. We've got some work happening, and we'll be sharing some executive memo type information in the next couple of weeks that further articulate that. Again, one thing that we heard very clearly was the need to differentiate for schools and districts. And so while we've developed ORIS from a research base, we know that other school districts have other tools that they prefer to use. And so our desire is to help ensure that we are providing the right levels of flexibility. ORIS is one of those tools. There are other tools that are available and that are currently in place. And so requirements versus opportunities, I think we're still looking to differentiate. We'll pause for additional questions now. Okay. Trying to exercise good wait time, as all educators do. We don't have dramatic hold music for you. But we'll close with this. If you want to go fast, go alone. And if you want to go far, go together. Historically, states have done things to schools. This new model, the spirit of partnership, really aims at engaging in this work with school districts, schools, and communities. And that's really the frame for our conversation is go together. Oregon together. We can do more when we do it together. I'm sure there will be many more questions. It's unlikely that with 98 people, we only had 3. So please feel free to email us at your leisure. And again, we thank you for your time this afternoon.
Thank you.